This is a video about the dredges of the goldfields. It was these large machines that revolutionized alluvial mining throughout the world. When it comes to mining gold, there are two methods. One is hard rock mining and the other is placer, or which is sometimes referred to as alluvial mining. The easiest method of getting gold is by placer mining, and the ways of extracting gold with this method really hasn't changed for thousands of years. It was placer mining that started pretty much all the gold rushes you read about. Getting gold in placer gravels is actually quite simple. All you need is a gold pan, a shovel, a strong back, and you're in business. If you wanted to get more gold, you teamed up with a partner who had a shovel and got yourself a rocker box. If you wanted to increase your production, you'd get yourself a sluice box or a long tom and maybe even another partner to help with the digging. It was all hard bull work, but everything would usually go well until all the easy pickings of gold were gone. When you are mining alluvial gold, the one thing to remember is that gold is heavy, and over time this gold ends up on bedrock or some other kind of hard pan material. This depth can be anywhere from surface to hundreds of feet down, and once you have to start digging deeper, the workload just starts to add up. As an old miner friend of mine once said, digging deep is an uphill battle. But in order to get to that gold that lay deeper in the ground, it took more than just manpower. It also took lots of money and lots of horsepower, and this is where the dredges of the goldfields came into play. Most of the old pictures you see of these dredges were known as bucket line dredges. These floating machines were monsters. Some of the larger dredges were over 100 feet long and 30 or more feet wide. The depth of the pontoon base could reach 8 feet in height. As an example, Dredge No. 4 that rests on Bonanza Creek in the Klondike was 8 stories high and 2/3 the size of a football field. It weighed in over 3,000 tons. It could dig gravels 47 feet below water level and reach up to 17 feet above the water, using iron buckets that each had a 16 cubic foot capacity. This dredge could process 18,000 cubic yards of pay gravels every day, and these dredges worked 24 hours a day for 365 days a year. It just wasn't in the Klondike that these dredges mined the gold. These machines were all around the world. You could find them working in California after the big rush was over, all the way up to the tundras of Alaska. Some of the very first dredges to be built were in New Zealand, and the designs were modified over time and specific to location. Many of these old dredges at first were powered by steam, but eventually a lot of them were switched over to electric or internal combustion engines. Each dredge, depending on the size, could have anywhere from 6 to 12 workers, and because these machines never quit, there would be multiple shifts that worked 24 hours a day. One of the biggest challenges at the time was getting these huge dredges to the mining location. Take for instance the No. 4 dredge up in Dawson City, Yukon. This huge dredge was built in Ohio and had to be shipped across the country to the west coast, where it was loaded onto a ship that took it to Skagway, Alaska. From there, everything was shipped on the White Pass Yukon Railroad to Whitehorse, Yukon, where it was once again reloaded onto steamboats and sent up the Yukon River to Dawson. From there it would be unloaded and then moved piece by piece with horse teams to where it was going to mine, and then had to be assembled. This was an amazing feat considering there were no roads and very little infrastructure at the time. The operating principle of these dredges was pretty simple. In the front was the bucket ladder that reached down into the ground. Each bucket was connected to a large chain much like a bicycle chain, and as it turned upward, these buckets will scoop up gravels and slowly bring them up towards the dredge. Once these buckets reached the top of the chain ladder, the contents would dump out into a large steel cylinder inside the dredge. The steel cylinder, called the trommel, was perforated with holes and had water pumped inside to help wash the gravels. This trommel was at a slight angle and also rotated, causing the gravels to be washed as they worked their way towards the end of the trommel. All the small rocks and bits of gold would fall through these many holes, and the larger rocks would continue down this cylinder. These larger rocks would then fall out onto a conveyor belt, or better known as a stacker, where these rocks would end up in piles known as tailings. The small rocks and gold particles that fell through the many holes along with the water would then flow down a long wide tray called a sluice box. Inside the sluice box would be riffles and carpet materials that the gold and concentrates would become trapped in. After a certain amount of hours of dredging, the dredge would stop and this carpet material was removed and washed out so the gold could eventually be separated and cleaned. The carpet material would then be replaced in the trays and the dredge would start back up. Today, most of these old dredges have fallen into disrepair. Some of these machines have been taken over by local governments and are being rebuilt as heritage pieces. Other dredges have been bought by smaller mining companies who are modernizing them for actual mining purposes again. If you ever wanted to go and actually see one of these old dredges in person, you could go to Dawson City and tour the number 4 dredge that is now owned by the parks. There are other dredges also, like the Dredge 8 in Fairbanks and also in Sumter, Oregon. If you're an old mining fan and haven't toured one of these old dredges, make sure you put one of these old machines on your bucket list of things to see. I hope you enjoyed this short video about the old dredges of the goldfields. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you more old lost mine stories.